Pastor Steve?
Yes.
Oh, my. Steve Greenberg from Bible College.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This is Trent. Early days, maybe he was saved for maybe a month or two, and still had the mullet. Oh, we had so much wrong here. He wore Birkenstocks, so we called him Fred Flintstone. Yeah, but don't tell my children, right? That's what brother is for. Oh, you did?
We hold up.
Stevie and stuff. Here, I'll take it down now.
Culture man.
Like culture, when I make like kombucha type culture, like
What are you saying?
like you mean like culture and kombucha culture, right?
As in, the entirety of a culture, not just a subculture. You're thinking of like, when you say, which do you mean like the drink? Okay, come from tree huggers, we call them tree huggers.
Wow.
Is that what you mean? Is that what you're talking about?
You know.
Like the hippie culture? So today we're going to talk about not just subcultures. So track with me on this. Subcultures are variations within a culture, right? So would you guys all call yourself Americans?
Yeah.
Right? So what does that mean? Yeah, you're American, right? American, right? I had on John Deere, American. So within America, we have many different kinds of people. But we all call ourselves American, which means most people speak some form of English. They have a Western point of view, right? They're individualistic, right? That's the majority culture. And most people in America would say, if they are religious, they're Christian. They might not be religious, they could be atheists. But rarely do you find an actual practicing Muslim. It's like less than 2%. Buddhism is less than 1%, right? So if people say, I am religious, they normally say, I'm some form of a Christian, Catholic, even a Jehovah's Witness or something with a cross, right? You guys follow me on that. Don't go too far into the cultic part. To something that has a connection to the Bible, cultic or not. Now, in America, there are subcultures. That's what you're referring to, right? And subcultures, like my son, he loves skateboarding. So what do we call him? Skater. What does that mean? He's part of a skater subculture. When I was in high school and I had that ridiculous mohawk, what was I?
Punk rock.
Punk rock, right? It was my subculture. My other daughter, she loves something else. I don't know what's like this other, but you guys follow me. Everybody is in a major culture, and then they're also in a subculture. And then as you grow older, like Trent no longer has a mullet, so we no longer call him a Fred Flintstone, Birkenstock wearing tree hugger with his cool mullet, and his girlfriend at the time had this crazy tree hugging outfits that she would wear. So now he's more of a normal, what would the term be, you know, like most pastors are, they use the term homogenized, they're kind of like blended in, right? There's nothing crazy, they're all just kind of boiled down to they all look the same. Like when you normally meet a Calvary pastor, you can tell he's a Calvary pastor, right? They all pretty much look the same, it's homogenized. So as we grow, we start to blend into our new subculture. Today, we're not going to talk about subcultures. Today, we're going to talk about going to a whole new place, learning a whole new language, and being a part of a whole new people. Now, these people that we're wanting to go to are made up of what we would consider to be the unreached. Now, do you guys remember how many cultures there are in the world? Ethno-linguistic people? 17,000. And how many are remaining unreached? 7,000. So 10,000 of the 17 have some form of Christianity. Some are growing, some are decreasing, but there's access to Jesus Christ in written form, like a Bible, in a church gathering, and some kind of evangelism in their native or national language. While 7,000 people today, people groups, I should say, making up billions of individuals. Could be 3 billion, could be 4 billion, depends on how you gauge it. That's what we talked about last week. Unreached people. 7,000 unique ethno-linguistic people are without the gospel. Well, how does the gospel go to them? By people that lose their birth culture, enter into a new culture, the people they want to reach, fully accept and embrace that culture, as long as it doesn't go against God's word and doesn't go against the written text. They fully embrace that culture, they learn that language, they become so much like the people they want to reach. We call them pioneer missionaries, reaching frontier people. So you're literally going into a new land. That's what a frontier is, right? It's a new place. So a pioneer missionary goes into a frontier people, understands who they are, learns about them, dies to their birth culture, accepts this new pioneer people group, accepts this new culture that they're going into, they become like them, and then they begin sharing the gospel from within that culture in a way that those people not only understand, but respect. Because you can't share the gospel unless there's mutual respect between two people. Imagine somebody coming into your world and telling you that everything you've ever known could be totally wrong. And everything you've believed in and your parents have told you about and your grandparents have confirmed, all of that is wrong. And this new person with this new language and this new accent and these new clothes and this new way to eat is going to convince you to switch over to their side? That's absurd, isn't it? Can you imagine if somebody just came in and just said, change everything you know and become like me, and you're like, I think that you're a total maniac, you're a kook, you're weird, you're awkward, you're out of bounds. Why would I ever want to leave my culture and become like you? So the missionary learns to be totally cross-cultural. And not just cross-cultural for a week, totally dying to your birth culture and being, in a sense, reborn culturally in this new land. So that's what we're going to learn about today. Today is going to be the most interesting, and I'm promising this, the most interesting and the most educational class you'll ever have in Bible college. All right, let's pray. Lord, we are so thankful for these moments, Lord, to be away from all of the pressures and schedules of normal life at home. Thank you for giving us this place, this season of our lives, 6 months, a year, however long it lasts, Lord, this season where we can just focus on you as we consider, Lord, what it means to be your ambassador, as we think about what it means to cross into a new people group. God, give us wisdom. Fill us with your Holy Spirit. Pour out your Spirit upon us today in this class in the same way that you did in the beginning of the book of Acts. You promised, Lord, as we wait upon you, that you will fill us, and then you will send us into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the very ends of the earth. Today, Lord, help us to understand how that's going to happen and what needs to take place in our lives. Touch us, Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Culture matters. So the purpose of the church is what? I'm asking the question. The purpose of the church is what?
The evangelization and discipleship of the whole world.
To fulfill God's word and his will throughout the world. Right? That was a perfect answer. You can just say it a million different ways. The purpose of the church is to bring the love of God through his son Jesus Christ to every person alive today. God so loved the world, the cosmos, the entirety of it, that he gave his only son. And he desires all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. Now, we talk about culture. Why? Because culture matters. If we offend people, they won't listen to us. This is a picture of a group of Buddhist monks. You see, in Buddhism, a lot like in early Hebrew culture, if you had 5 or 6 or 7 kids, especially boys, oftentimes you couldn't feed them all because you can't feed that many people. And so just like Hannah in the Old Testament gave her son Samuel as a young boy to the temple. Do you guys remember this story? Hannah said, I want to dedicate my boy to the Lord. Eli and Eli's wicked sons, take my son and raise him as a priest in your tabernacle, in your community. Well, the Buddhists still do that today. So when I lived in Sri Lanka, I lived there for 2 years, I would see kids like this all all the time. And kids were so inquisitive that you could read on their face what they were thinking. You see, adults have this way of like masking their true emotions or masking their true intentions, but kids, they'll like look at you. When I was in Africa, I was living in the village, I would wake up and the windowsill of my house, I would see these little eyes peeking up every morning as I would like my breast, like, can I, literally 5 or 10 kids just staring into my room. In Sri Lanka, they would, when I would come down the street, they would watch me. And they'd come over, okay, now, we know each other, so I'm not gonna offend you, right? And I'd be like, wow, the hair on his face. Right, because they don't have brains like that, right? And then the tattoos are the favor, because you're the perfect example today, right? Right? Inquisitive, looking, and wanting to know, and all of a sudden my arm would start pulling up, and they're like, and then if I spoke their language, I would tell them this African and Asian kids, them all, in the night, my tiger wakes up, and he crawls through the hallway. They are watching you, they're looking at you, they want to know everything about you. So you come into this country and you want to share with them the love of God, but you're totally weird to them. They're staring at you and God's saying, go be my ambassador. And you're like, Lord, I want to do that. I'm excited about evangelism. I'm excited about these people groups. I've learned about them. I don't want to stay on the cruise ship, right? I want to jump off the cruise ship. I want to swim across the water. I want to climb onto a slave ship. I want to be with those people. But when you get there with them, you're a total, complete kook in their eyes. They don't even know what to do with you. And the Lord says, be an ambassador. And you're like, Lord, what if I do it wrong? What if my example is incorrect? Let me give you a story of when I was in Bible college. This is before I even understood cross-culture, before I even knew about missions as a whole. We had Calvary Chapel Bible College was in Twin Peaks. It was in the mountains just over the hill. Like when it snows, you can see the snow on those mountains. It was over there. And we were mostly white, European, or what would be Latin American, a few Asian American, young students. That was the majority of our group. And then, and all English speaking. And then, in the weekends, we would rent out our facilities. It's a conference center. Bible college is part of it, conferences are the other half of it, all on the same property. We rent out the conference center to a group of Koreans. Have you guys ever dealt with Koreans just come over? They're a whole different kind of people, aren't they? Now, these are born again, God-fearing, God-loving Koreans that want to bring a group of young Korean Americans up to this mountain retreat and spend the weekend pouring into them. Well, their culture was so different than every interaction we had as European or Latin Americans. Every interaction we had with these Korean Americans was offensive. We would go into the sanctuary because I worked on staff, so I'd be like, setting the tables or making stuff in the kitchen. So I was always in the facility. I'd go into the facility and they would be shouting, and I'm like, why are they shouting like that? Like, I'm used to Chuck, right? You guys ever heard Chuck Smith shout? Right? Never. Praise the Lord, right? Chuck would never shout. These guys were shouting like, wow, those guys are weird. Are they like angry with each other? And then one day I was going through the back of the sanctuary area where they had their conference, and this pastor came out of the bathroom, and he looks at me, and he gets right in my face, and he goes, "No tongue!" And I'm like, what? He goes, "No tongue!" Okay, what were you saying? And he goes, "No towel to wash my hands and dry my hands with." I was like, wow, okay. So are you angry with me? Have I offended you in some way? I realized over time that in his culture, that's just the way they communicate. I was so offended by this guy shouting at me that in the next staff meeting, as we're sitting there with the director and the whatever of people, and I was part of the kitchen staff or the administration staff, we're talking about it. I'm like, man, this guy shouted at me in the hallway that we didn't have towels in the bathroom. Why didn't he say, and this is cultural, "Excuse me, sir, did you know there's no towels in the bathroom?" It'd be good to replenish that so that when our visitors come, they'll have towels. You see, it's cultural. I wanted him to say it in a way that my mother taught me to say it. So the director said, as we're discussing this in the staff meeting, he goes, "Yeah, you know what? They're the rudest people we've ever dealt with." And the director turns to his assistant and says, cancel their contract, tell them they can never come back. And I was like, I didn't mean to start that fire. You guys ever had a conversation like that? I didn't mean to be the one to plant that bomb, but every person in the facility, European and Latin Americans that spoke English, every one of us were offended by the Korean Americans. We're talking about now Christian entities, a Christian Korean community and a Christian, more American or European community. When they interacted culturally, they offended each other to the point that we as a Christian conference center, as a Christian facility, we canceled their contract and told them last minute, you can't have your retreat, we don't like you, never come back again. Now, was that God? No, it was just personal misunderstandings and cultural offenses. They love God, we love God, but the way we interacted caused so much friction that we built up a wall and we said, we don't even want you to come on our facility any longer. That's called cultural offense, and that creates major, major problems. We were in sin for canceling their contract just like that. They were, I'm not going to say they were in sin, but they were insensitive to not understand how most Christian Americans interact, and because those two cultures were so strong, they clashed. Now, we talked about different kinds of culture. We talk about being a pioneer missionary. The gospel has advanced the most recently in what we call space-age societies. Have you guys ever thought of yourself as space-age people?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I wish.
You wish, right? Is it possible for you to go to the moon or something like that?
Maybe in like 10 years.
Possibly, right? So we live in a generation where our technology is growing and advancing so much that from the time that you're born until the time that you die, you will see 100 times more technology created and perfected than your grandparents ever did. Which means your culture, our subculture, are so used to new inventions, new creations, and new technologies that our minds are like this, like we were born here, but these things are possible. And the more we work and the more we do, and the better our computers get and the better things happen. Like for example, the new iPhone, I think this is the new one. It does, what was the amount? I think it does, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 10 trillion, not billion, 10 trillion things per second. That's technology. You guys track with me on microchips and processing? Okay, you guys are looking at me like, what? All right, so I won't know. What it means is they can think about 10 trillion things like that. That's technology. When I was born, computers weren't even possible for a common person. When I was in high school, I saw my very first computer, and you were gonna go A, and it would take a while for it to appear on the screen. B, and then when you wanted to print it, the printer was in a separate room with glass because the printer was so loud, it would scream as all, and all it would print out is A, B, C, and the result. Wow, did you see that? You hit the little button, and then it appears on the glass screen, and then it appears on paper. That was a big deal. When I was 15, that was a big deal. Today, as I'm driving up here, I'm talking to my friend in North Africa. I'm talking to another friend in Central Africa. I'm texting with my voice. I'm getting in with you guys and creating my presentation. As I'm on the freeway, probably speeding and breaking all the speed limits. Like, what kind of world do I live in? We're space age. God has called us as ambassadors with all of this progression to go back in time and to reach those people that are the most cut off. Where do the most cut off people live? In what I call the Stone Age. If they're living in a large city, they probably have some access to the gospel. Because in large cities, people get together. They share thought. They're more flexible. They're more willing to yield. But when they're living in remote villages, they're isolated. So for us to finish the Great Commission, for us to fulfill the purpose of the church, we must be willing to drop all of the things that we know that are culturally normal. All of the things that we find culturally comfortable. And that would be the key word for today. All of the things that we find comfortable, drop them and say, I want to become like Jesus. And literally walk into a remote village and just spend time with people. Sit with them, eat with them, and talk with them. They will not be impressed by your Bible knowledge. They will not be impressed by your technical skills. They will not be impressed by your education. What do they need? They need a common person sitting with them, living like them in their world. And when that happens, mutual respect will start to grow. When that mutual respect starts to grow, they'll start to listen. And after many years, not weeks, not a short-term trip. Short-term trips are for you. You guys know that. Short-term trips are not for the unreached. They're for the missionary to be exposed to the needs of the world. Go there long-term. After many years of sitting with them, living like them, space age to stone age. And that's a picture from a tribe that I'm working with right now. We're translating a Bible for that tribe right now with nationals. Going from space age to stone age and spending time with them is when the gospel becomes attainable. It becomes possible for them to hear it, understand it, and get saved. So is culture a major factor in world missions? Absolutely. First it's the pure gospel, and then it's delivered in the language and the culture that the people can understand. You can have the best theology in the world, but if you don't understand their culture, it just bounces right off of them. You can have great cultural understanding, but if you don't actually preach the gospel, it doesn't matter. So to me, of course, the gospel is always going to be the most important, but barely second to that is cultural relevancy. Being like them, understanding them, and respecting them mutually as you would want them to respect you. Now with this, one of the big questions is where do I belong? Where am I called to? We talk about 7,000 different people groups out there. It's a massive number of people. There's a lot of things going on there. God is going to reveal to you where you belong. Now I really like this photo. This is a normal short-term photo of a European American full of passion and excitement that feels called to go somewhere. This is probably an American on a short-term trip to Uganda. You guys have all heard of Uganda. Everybody in the world goes to Uganda. God called me to live there for 4 years. It was the craziest thing in the world, but that's where most people go. So this is an American, like us, going over with his cool backpack. What do you call it? A camel backpack, you know? With a little water thing, a camel pack, you got your water in there. You're all, you're like ready to go conquer the world. You're surrounded by these amazing children with smiles that could never be rivaled by what I would call a white kid. These African kids smile so beautiful. They laugh, they're hospitable. It's an amazing time. And oftentimes, we're in these situations, these short-term moments, and we're thinking, this is missions. Let me tell you, it's not. This is just the beginning. This is just a moment where we touch hands, where we see each other, where we realize that God's calling us to die to ourselves and become like them. If you're taking notes, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20, Paul very clearly says, therefore, we are ambassadors of Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. What is the calling of the church? What was Paul, the apostle's calling? To be an ambassador. An ambassador does not speak for themselves. An ambassador doesn't hold on to their own culture. An ambassador doesn't say that they're superior. An ambassador simply takes a message from one ruler to another location cross-culturally, learns to adapt to that location, speak that language, become like those people, and then clearly present the message of the king. That's what an ambassador does. Yes?
Is that definition of an ambassador in biblical context?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about being cross-cultural, so an ambassador today and Paul the Apostle, same context. To take the message of the king, which is the creator of the universe, which everybody, Romans chapter 1, they've rejected, their minds have become dark, right? They're futile in their thoughts. to take the message of that creator and to give it to a group of people in multiple languages, in multiple places, in a way that they can understand. That's what an ambassador does. And that's what Paul says. We are Christ ambassadors. Now I want you to notice this, and I know I don't have it on the screen, but in 2 Corinthians, Paul does not say, I am Christ ambassador. He says we. And he's not just talking about him and Barnabas, or him and Silas, or him and John Mark, or him and somebody else, or him and Timothy. He's talking about we the believers, we the church, we the body of Christ are the ambassadors of God. This is why we are on the earth today. And cross-culturally, oftentimes people won't understand your words. They rarely will until you've lived with them long enough where you adopt their way of speaking. Don't expect them to learn your language. Now, it's a blessing when you go somewhere and English is a common language, like Hong Kong or some part of China or somewhere else. It's a blessing to have that. But you need to learn their language in their world. When you do that, they will begin to understand you. So what do they do with you and trying to learn about you before you're able to speak a common language? How do people make a judgment about you? How do they understand you before you have a common language?
Your actions.
By your actions. So your actions speak louder than your words, right? Just let that sink in for a moment. Your actions speak louder than your words. Translate that to something that's very memorable. Your life may be the only Bible they ever read. What you do is the first impression of Jesus Christ in their world. So if you come in and you create all of these offenses, they will reject you and reject God. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm in a meeting in the Middle East, in the Arab world, and I'm not supposed to sit on a table so I feel like I'm being rude, but just forgive me, I'm not really being rude. I'm just giving you an example. If I sit, and don't be offended, and I put my foot like this, right, in an Arab culture, what have I just said to my brother here? You're lower than the dirt. I'm flipping them off. Thank you for the very clear expression, right? Now, do you feel like I'm doing that to you? No? Why? Because you're American. So you have no problem with the bottom of the foot because you don't walk around in areas where horses and cows are. You don't have all that stuff on your feet, right? That's why we don't take off our shoes when we come into a building. You always know when you come into a certain cultural household when all the shoes are outside and nobody's wearing any shoes inside. Why? Because their ancestors lived in a world that was very dirty and they had to take off the shoes or they track all that stuff in. So this ambassador from America is in the Middle East. This is during the Gulf War, when Saddam Hussein was still in charge, and 9/11 just happened, all that. This American ambassador sent out by President Bush at the time, he's sitting with Saddam Hussein. He doesn't know culturally that he can't put his foot like this. But to sit this way, in America, that's kind of manly, right? That's how a man would sit. He's got his foot up. Saddam Hussein walks in, sees the guy's bottom of his foot. He walks out and says, call the general, we're going to war. Because Saddam Hussein interpreted the ambassador's body language as flipping the guy off, and we want to go to war with you. And the ambassador's like, what just happened? And the other guy said, dude, put your foot down here. Men sit like this. And the guy's like, I don't sit like that. A woman would sit like that, or maybe a real gentleman. I'm a man, I'm an American, right? I'm going to sit like this. So culturally, honestly, we almost went to war with the guy over the way the ambassador sat. Your actions speak louder than your words. As an ambassador, you are the first, and oftentimes the only Bible they will ever read. When my wife and I moved to Africa, we moved into a very remote village. Did I show you guys my testimony? And the hut, and the bugs and all that? Okay, so we're living there. Did I tell you the story about Vicky, the girl that got saved because we lived there? No, okay, sorry. I move around. I want to make sure I'm repeating myself. So my wife and I moved into this hut, and you heard about the rats in the night, you know, and the bugs and spiders. It's that whole kind of environment. Well, every day, we would realize that we don't have running water. You wake up in the morning and you're like, man, I don't have running water yet. It's never going to happen, but you kind of realize it every morning. So we wake up, I've got a big conference to teach at or something to do, so I stay back in the hut and I'm studying, preparing for some kind of a message I'm going to give to this other community. My wife realizes we have no water in our little hut. So she walks down to the well to get water, because in that part of the world, you don't just turn a faucet. You take a 5-gallon can, it looks like the gas cans that are mounted on the back of a Jeep, or the back of like a Range Rover. You take a 5-gallon can, they call them jerry cans, like the old military cans, and you walk down to the well, and you pump your water, and then you pick it up. Now, how heavy is 5 gallons of water?
45 pounds?
It's 45 pounds. You guys ever picked up a 5-gallon bottle to put it on top of, the little drinking dispenser thing?
Yeah.
It's heavy. I want you, just for fun, right, if you ever want to, pick up one of those somewhere in here and walk down to the stoplight on the main road and walk back with it, right? The well was further than that. So there's my wife, just bringing water home, right? Trying to do this thing with the water. So Vicky, this African lady that was a Muslim, she was watching my wife and I every day. Now, we had no idea that we were like in the spotlight. Vicky was this kind of unseen person that would be moving around in our community. I think she kind of like maybe cleaned up something on these little huts that we lived in, and then she would go somewhere else. But either way, Vicky was watching us like the little Buddhist monks all day. And oftentimes in this part of the world, when it rains so hard, you can hear the rain coming. And it doesn't rain all day, it doesn't sprinkle like over here. It doesn't rain just a little bit, and there's no like weather forecast that says, it's gonna rain most of the morning. It'll be perfectly sunny, blazing hot, tropic climate. We're on the equator, right in the sun. We're just sweating to death, and all of a sudden you hear this water coming, like in the picture, and it sounds like horses, like thousands of horses marching across the landscape. It sounds like you can feel it, the ground starts to shake. So I'm in my hut, my wife's down at the well, pumping water, and I realized yesterday we were doing some kind of construction, and I got red dirt all over my Levi's, like red clay dirt. My wife hand washed my Levi's with the last bit of water that we had. Do you ever wash Levi's by hand? Any of you guys? Just wringing those things out once, you feel like your fingers are gonna fall off. Or why? Because we're technologically advanced. We just throw our thing in a machine and we hit a button and something else does all the work for us. Well, most of the world doesn't have that. So my wife is hand washing my Levi's, and she's like literally almost crying from her wrist being a carpal tunnel, right? She's just like cranking away. I go out there, I try to help her with it. We're bringing them out. We hang up my clothes in the laundry line. We're letting them dry. And I'm sitting there studying. I know the laundry's right outside of the laundry line. I know my wife walked a half mile to carry 45 pounds of water back from the well. And just so you know, I'm not really allowed to do that culturally. The ladies have to do it. And so if I do it and my wife doesn't do it, it's seen weird culturally. So she's got to do way more work than she's ever normally done. And I'm not allowed to step in and just do the things that I would normally do. Because culturally, I can't be seen as a woman and she can't be seen as a man. You follow me? Culturally, we got to play that out. And then we're like, does the Bible say that a woman can't carry water? Right? There's all of these questions all day long. So my wife's working, I'm studying, I hear the rain coming. And all of a sudden I realize if I let my laundry stay on the laundry line, that amount of rain will splash so much red dirt off the ground, it will resaturate my pants with red dirt, and we'll have to go through this whole process all over again. She'll have to re-wring out my clothes, she'll have to walk down to the well to get the water, she'll have to bring it up, and I'm like, wait, whoa, that's crazy. So I put down my Bible, my notebook, I run outside, I grab my trousers, not pants, because pants overseas are underwear. So never say, where are your pants, or nice looking pants, because they'll be thinking you're talking about their underwear. So I had to train myself. I went outside to grab my trousers off the line. I grab them, I bring them inside the hut, I hang them up on a line in the hut for this exact purpose. Once the rain passes, about an hour later, I go back outside, the sun's blazing again, I put my trousers back on the line, they're now dripping wet again. Now they're going to be dried by the sun as my wife pulls up because she was hiding underneath of a banana tree while that rainstorm was coming, trying to learn language and hang out with the ladies. She comes up, I'm putting the laundry line back on, and Vicky comes walking up, and Vicky's looking at my wife and I just with this astounding look on her face. And we're like, what just happened? Because see, this happens culturally all the time. Something's going on, they're all amazed by it, and you have no idea what happened. Because to you, you're just living your normal life. A couple days later, Vicky comes to my wife. And she says, Heidi, now Vicky spoke English, which was a blessing. So we could learn this right away. If she didn't speak English, it would have taken us years to even hear this story. She said, Heidi, I want to know who your God is. And I was looking at her like, Vicky, you're a Muslim. Your husband's a Muslim. Your family are all Muslim. Why in the world would you walk away from your heritage to learn about our God? This is not something that happened. And she said, for one reason, because of the way that your husband loves you. I have never seen love like that. And my wife's like, what are you talking about? We don't show outward displays of affection. Because in that culture, come on up, you're my wife for this moment. Yeah, you John, right? Okay, John, your name is Heidi. Okay, long hair, and you're incredibly gorgeous. A man in this culture would never embrace his wife like this. Ever. This would be seen as pornographic, right? I would never hold my wife's hand. I would never sit by her in church. Ladies sit on that side, men sit on this side. John, you've done great. Thank you so much. I haven't hugged my wife. I haven't held her hand in public. I haven't even spoken to her in the American ways of showing love. You're so beautiful, sweetie. I can't believe you're the best one. I didn't into that stuff because it's culturally offensive. Vicky says, I'm willing to walk away from Islam because of the way your husband loves you. And my wife said, what do you mean? She says, I've never known a man that would get up from what he was doing to walk outside to take laundry off the laundry line. I've never known a man to do it. And when I saw your husband do that so that you wouldn't have to go down to the well and you wouldn't have to do it, I knew that there was God's love living in you and that God's love was a part of you. Will you disciple me? Like, what is this? This is crazy. What were we expecting for our revival moment? An evangelistic crusade, all of this grandeur? No, it was loving one another, serving each other. It was our actions speaking way before our words were even heard or understood. Vicky then brought 2 friends and 4 friends and 10 friends. My wife, in time, in the next couple months, had a Bible study with, I think, 15 or 20 ladies. One day she asked some of the ladies, I don't think I have a picture of the Bible study. No, she asked some of the ladies, she said, tell me, how do you know who the Lord is? And they said, oh, Vicky got saved. And then she told her 2 friends, they got saved. And then the 3 of them came to my house and realized that I am the town drunk and that no one's ever loved me. And they loved on me for a couple weeks and said, come to this Bible study with this weird white person and they're going to tell you about the love of God. And she's like, no one ever comes to my house, but because you 3 ladies came to my house, I'll go with you to that American person's little Bible study. And before we know it, the town drunk is radically born again. She'd be out beating kids for fun. And now she's worshiping God. And we're like, how did it start? With our actions. Of course, our words had to follow. Of course, we need to be ready to preach and be very clear. Of course, we had to do what needed to be done, but it all started with our actions. One lady in my wife's Bible study stood up and said, I've been a witch doctor my entire adult life. People bring their sick children to me. We make them bring a chicken with them. I slaughter the chicken. I drip its blood over this little stone altar. I dance around the altar and I conjure up spirits, demons, to try to save the sick child. And a group of the ladies from your Bible study came to my house and told me about Jesus Christ, and I'm radically born again from witchcraft. And we're like, wait, Lord, you mean loving one another is what opened that door? Yeah. Your actions speak louder than your words. You're just visiting?
I'm just.
I want to jump in. Okay,
Yeah, sorry.
You may be the only Bible they ever read. Yes.
I have a question. So, culturally, you're not supposed to do stuff.
Millions of things. It takes 2 years to learn.
But
Every culture's different.
that, for example, the example you gave us, you did something that was culturally not okay,
It was a fine line where I didn't know I was doing women's work, but when I did that, it ministered to the women. The men might have laughed at me, and I'm glad that no men saw me, right? But the women were blessed by it.
Okay.
And we never know. Do you guys follow me on that? We never know. Some missionaries tell stories and say, 15 years ago I did this, and they didn't hear about it for almost 2 decades. So we never know what's going on. The point is, love one another. What does Jesus say? Jesus said very clearly, this is the Last Supper. He says, my time is drawing near. I'm here in Jerusalem. I'm going to be executed. My time with you is almost up. This is just before he gives John 15. I am the vine, you are the branches. Some of the most profound words from Jesus happened here at the Last Supper. He's just washed their feet. Judas has just left to go betray him. You guys follow me on this context? These are the moments where the Son of God says, this is why we are here. This is what we are to do. As he's giving the Great Commission, he says, John 13, 34 and 35, and I'm going to add the word single. A single new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. How far is Jesus about to go for these people? Everything. He's just about to give them completely everything. He's about to die for them. So he says, I'm setting this standard so high that you'll never be at the point where you say, I've completed that. Love one another. And this is Christian to Christian. This is disciple to disciple. They're around the Last Supper table. It's actually square, it wasn't round. But they're all laying in a big square around this table. And Jesus says, love each other just as I have loved you. And notice verse 35. By this love, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Do you feel he's reiterating it? Love one another. They'll know you're my disciples if you love one another. So the key to cross-cultural ministry is death to self. The key to being an ambassador is to say, God, how did you love the people that you were with? The key to understanding missions, and never forget this, is to love those on your team first and foremost with all of your heart. Because the world is watching, and they are saying, wow, how is it that those people that are all foreigners, some young, some old, some, let's say, male, some female, some from clearly this ethnicity, some from that ethnicity, they have come as a group of 5 or maybe 6, and they love each other in a way that's not tribal. It's not family-based. It's we are now a part of God's family. 17,000 people, groups, and languages can all say we are one family. And when God's love is poured into each of the members of that missionary group, and their love is being poured from God into them, from them into each other, from each other back into them, it will naturally do what? Blow open the doors for evangelism. That love is what makes things possible. It's not your wit. It's not your apologetics. It's not how great your grades were in Bible college. Please study yourself to death. Pray yourself alive again. But that's not what's going to save the unreached. What's going to save them is the same love that Jesus had. When Jesus came to this earth, was he completely Jewish?
Yeah.
In what way was he not Jewish? Almost none. I mean, very rarely would he say, your culture is offending my father, so I'm not going to do that, when he dealt with the Pharisees. The only time he wasn't Jewish is on the Mount of Transfiguration, just for a moment. The rest of the time they said, you're a Jew, you're from Galilee, you're just like us. You're Joseph's son, you're the carpenter, we know you. Your mother wasn't even married when she got pregnant with you. He was totally them. And because of that, they listened, they understood, they connected, and then he lived out what? God's kingdom through his earthly culture in a way that was undeniable. You may be, and you probably are, the only Bible they ever read. Do you guys turn on the air conditioner in here, or should I just open the door? It won't go back.
Max has got you.
All right.
That's the heat.
I was going to take charge, but then I thought, I'm a visitor. I can't just take charge. Thank you. I got to be nice. Love is the only thing that is what we call the universal language. Now, love is interpreted differently based on the culture that you're in. So I'm going to go through a couple more scripts with you, and then after our break, we're going to have everybody come up, and I'm going to pick you guys out. Like I picked up my brother here, and I messed with my brother there. I'm going to pick each of you out and bring you up here and embarrass you to death. The things that happened to me entire time you think, wait, are they loving me? And how can I love them after they've done this to me? Okay, if I respond wrong, I'm seen as being unloving. If I don't love them and if I don't work within their culture, I can't preach the gospel. Lord, I've given up everything. I've sold my life. I've walked away from all of it. This is the crucial moment. Eternity is hanging in the balance. What do I do? Cross-cultural misunderstandings greatly hinder our ability to show God's love. This is not my daughter, but this looks exactly like my daughter when we first went to Africa, and then my second daughter when we went to India. My kids were blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And I'm not joking. I wanted to, in Africa and Asia, find a way to change my skin color. I stuck out just like this. My kids are like, Dad, why'd you bring us here? We're the lightest skinned people in the entire city. The kids surround us, they laugh, they look, they poke. They're like, look at the hair. And they're touching. You're okay? You're okay? This is the way it is. Like, what's up with, like touching. And this is what the Africans would say. White man, what? And then they're literally pulling on my hair. I'm doing exactly what the kids would do to my kids, right? Now, we've known each other for a couple days, right? Imagine being a 5-year-old kid. Mortified. You don't have the ability like a young adult to say, yes, this is the most awkward moment I've ever experienced in my life, but eternity is going to be a thing so I can handle it. My kids are losing their minds. Why? Culture shock is real. This little kid being laughed at, being poked at, being prodded, feels like an animal in the zoo. And everybody comes just to look. Look at the zebra, right? Look at the elephant. Look at the lion in the zoo. How in the world do my children make friends with kids like this? All the other kids are laughing at them. They're like, you can't even come over to our house. Our mom will say, what's wrong with you? We literally, I'm not joking, I'm not exaggerating. We literally wanted to find some kind of a food or a pill or an herb that would darken our skin. I would go walking through the refugee camp, because remember, nobody has cars. You're always with people walking on dirt pathways. I'm walking down the road, and I am so bright that they can see me from a mile away. You guys have seen Where's Waldo, right? Pick out that one guy. 10,000 of the darkest people on the planet were my neighbors. And there I was, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And I literally asked the Lord, why? Why? Why didn't you give me darker skin? Why didn't you give me different hair? Why do my eyes have to look so scary that when the kids see me, they scream, Mooney, 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 Mooney. And they would look at me and they go, they would run away. And then I realized later that their older brothers and their cousins and uncles, whatever, would say to them, white men eat black babies. What's that all about? The kids were scared to death. They thought I came to their place to grab them and cook them and eat them. It was just a joke in their culture. Now the adults were my friends, were over there jiving and hanging out and talking and stuff, but the kids would all run away. I'm like, Lord, I look like a freak, a total freak. Why did you do this? And the Lord said, I made you exactly the way that I wanted you. Right? Psalm 139, you guys all know it? I created you, I knitted you together in your mother's womb. Before you even think, I know what you're going to think. Before you speak, you were exactly who I want you to be. And I'm like, yeah, Lord, that worked in Newport Beach, right? On the beach with the surfboard and a bunch of other blonde people. That was cool. And in my culture, I grew up and I had friends from all over the world. We love diversity. And then now you stick this white guy in the midst of the darkest people on the planet by 10,000 to 1, and you say thrive. I'm like, Lord, you're killing me. Literally, Lord, you're killing me. And the Lord says, I created these moments so that you can die. Do not be offended. And most important, don't be confused. Cross-cultural misunderstanding greatly hinder the ability to show God's love. Imagine you're called to one of our Asian unreached nations. So this is a video of a group of people in rush hour in an Asian place. It could be China, it could be Japan, it could be any of these highly compacted Asian areas. To give you an example, you're from Canada, right? The entire population of Canada is the same population as California. So imagine our state, if you guys are from California, our state spread out all over Canada. Tokyo is the equal population. The city So all of Canada, or all of California, or Tokyo. How many people are there? More people than could ever be on the ground level. If there weren't high-rise buildings, people would suffocate because there's so many of them. Well, how do you move around in a society like that? One of the most unreached places today on the planet is Japan. Just think about that for a moment. And if you go there, blonde hair, blue eyed like me, you're already a total freak. And they'll think you're Donald Trump, right? You wear a red hat and it's over. Imagine being here in one of these places and you've developed a relationship with a man or a woman, depends on your sex, because there'll probably be men to men, women to women in the early evangelistic stages. Imagine you develop a relationship with your friend, and your friend says, I want you to come home with this message. Maybe they're saved, maybe they're not. Either way, I want you to come home and honor my family with a message that's changed my life. Missionary, come with me to go visit my family. If you refuse, you've just told that person, I don't care about your family. If you don't care about their family, you don't care about them. Shame and honor. The family is the center of their culture. They're not Western like us. They're not individualistic. It's all about the collective family. And they say there's a train that leaves out of the train station at a certain time, and it goes to my village, and it only goes at certain times, so we have to get on it. And so you go in your heart thinking, now remember, cross-cultural misunderstandings, you go in your heart thinking, this is going to be awesome when I get my friend, and they're either saved or not saved, but either way, I feel like God's doing a work in their life. They're going to take me to visit their family. We're going to have this beautiful train ride. You guys ever taken trains before?
Yeah.
They're beautiful. Take trains to the Rockies, go to England or France and Germany. Take trips, beautiful. Anywhere in the Western world, trains are a luxury. People actually take them for fun because they're fun to take. Picture this in your life, and can you guys kill the lights in the back? You've got this anticipation in your mind that this is going to be a relaxing, wonderful, joyous adventure, and this is what happens in your home. Now, is anybody angry?
Oh, bro.
Just look closely. Anybody angry? Are these guys trying to hurt them? Look how they're pushing. Are they wearing white gloves to be gentle with you? To do what needs to be done? Watch this. Make sure the coat's in, make sure everything's okay. All right, ma'am, your hair is in, you're good. We're not done yet. Oh, they need help over there? Okay, great. Let's go help them. All right? Oh, come more people. All right, come on, guys.
How did they get out of that?
They just explode.
As soon as the doors open, they go flying out.
Now look closely in the windows. Real close. Imagine you got a 2-hour train ride. You look like that.
That sucks.
Okay? We can turn the lights back on.
So
What if you're claustrophobic?
gas.
What if you're claustrophobic and nobody tells you?
Gas.
But realize this, the local people, they don't know that your trains are different. This is all they know. So they invite you, you've got claustrophobia, you start to lose your mind in there. What if you just had a whole bunch of tea, because they don't drink coffee, they drink tea, and you really gotta go to the bathroom? Yes.
So I went to South Korea a few months ago, just to visit. And I remember there was one time I was hanging out with my friend, and he's like, okay, so there's one more bus, like tram,
Yeah.
that goes to where we need to go, and it's leaving in like 20 minutes, so let's go.
Yeah.
So I went to it, and I'm like, okay, well, we stopped at like every single stop before that, and I kid you not, like 5+ people got on every single
Every
time.
stop, yeah.
And it was standing room, and people were standing on the seat areas.
Yeah.
Like, it was insane. So like,
Could you breathe?
kind of.
Was there air conditioning?
No.
He's talking about South Korea, the most advanced place in Asia. Yes. guys?
In Moscow, it's almost a courtesy for the guys to get in front of the door and like bar it,
Right.
so that the other people don't have to get blocked.
Oh, I like to keep more people
Yeah,
being
like-
pushed in.
Yeah, to like keep people from
Right.
coming in, like you start to defend like
Right.
you're a trainer, you're like,
Yeah.
we're going.
Yeah,
stop
we're
us
done,
in the
we're
motion.
done, you can't get
Yeah.
on. And what if you're late? What do you do with that guy?
You just, they'll say you and they might like,
And can you push that guy over?
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes, now all we've done is gone from this location to that location, right? Now in Africa, they don't do trains because they don't maintain train tracks. They do these broken down buses. They stack so many people on a bus you can't breathe, and you're in the tropics, and kids don't wear diapers. Some people literally just put a kid on you, urinating all over your legs, and you're like, oh. I was supposed to teach when I got off this, when I got to this bus, and now I've got urine all over. And the mom just like, she takes her kid, she walks off. The bus drivers in Africa, oftentimes are chewing this thing like a chewing tobacco, like a baseball player would have a big wad in his cheek called chew. They chew this stuff called mira. It's a leaf from Ethiopia, and it's got kind of a cocaine thing in it. These guys are out of their minds chewing on this coke leaf, and they're driving down the street. My director, Pastor James, an African man, and his wife are on a bus with their 6 kids. The guy driving the bus is so crazy. Remember, there's potholes everywhere. There's cows. There's kids. They're swerving. They're dodging. They're bumping. And no one's ever fixed the suspension on these buses. You're in the back. You hit the ceiling. Okay, I hit the ceiling. Okay, I was in the back of a bus, and it was bouncing so bad, I had to hold my body for like 3 hours, and I went up and I hit the ceiling's like 5 feet up. My head hit it. Okay, so they're going down the road. This is now change the story. The window, which was probably broken before from something and never fixed correctly, pops out. Because of the wind flow through this massive window, this big, long city bus, the front window pops out, the back window pops out. The guy doesn't even take his foot off the accelerator. He's flying down the road. James says to me, he goes, "Ron, I got a kid here, I got a kid here," and I look and one of my kids is sliding down the middle aisle, and thankfully somebody grabbed my other kid. My wife's got 2 nursing babies, and we're flying down the road for hours. Hours! Just to get from here to there. That's culture. Nobody's trying to offend anybody. Nobody's out to get you. But you go in with these expectations of, it's going to be the way that I'm used to it being. Everybody has a personal vehicle. Every time you go into a place, there's a seat for you. When somebody drives, they do it courteously. That's a cultural interpretation, courteously. You think it's going to be a certain way, and it's not. Even in amazing places like Asia that are very hospitable, very thoughtful about what they do, they have to adapt to their society. If tens of thousands of people are leaving a city on Friday night to go home to see their families because they work all week long, 12 to 16-hour days, they can't go back to the village to see their family, but on Friday they all go back to see their family. That's what they do. There's not enough trains, there's not enough train tracks. There's so many people packed into one place, all of Canada, in one city, trying to visit their family on the weekend, and if they don't, what will their mother say? You don't love me anymore, son, daughter. You gotta come home and see me. It's just the way the culture is. They're trying to accommodate, and you try to fit into that culture. And just going from one place to another, you're so offended, your heart starts to change. You're like, I don't even like these people. I don't even want to be there. And eternity like fades from your mind, and your own cultural comforts start to rise up and become your first priority. This is the greatest problem in cross-cultural ministry. The dealing with our own expectations and the thoughts of our own comfort. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. And when you come back, I'll embarrass all of you, so get your cameras out, we'll have a great time. Are we ready? We back in class? All right, so now turn with me in your Bibles to 1 Corinthians 9:22. Now, this whole section of 1 Corinthians 9 is kind of the key to cross-cultural ministry. There are many other scriptures that go with it, but this is kind of the focus of it. When we have a Bible college and we do semesters on missions, we'll spend about 15 weeks, 2 hours a week, on cross-cultural ministry. So I have an entire 30-hour presentation on what we're going to try to do here in the next, 45 minutes. So if you feel robbed, you are, right? This is just to kind of get a handle on it. So much more to know.
Go, God.
So, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22. Notice this, and I would love to give some really good statements, but for the sake of time, Paul says, now notice the decision making going on here. Notice that Paul, as he would say in Romans chapter 15, Paul says, I make it my ambition to preach the gospel, where Christ has never been named. Here he says, how he preaches the gospel. He says, I have become all things to all people. Paul individually has chosen to change to be like other people. So when he goes into their culture, he says, I have become all things to all people. Now, this word become, we would love it to be a moment in a class, a 2-hour class. I walked into the class, I wasn't a cross-cultural missionary. I walked out, I was. It's never that way, is it? How long does God take to change you? Just think about salvation. Think about purifying your mind. My mom the other day was saying something about a young believer using the wrong word, the F word or the S word. And I said, Mom, I used those in my head for 10 years. I got saved, and I thought so much before I got saved, I would respond in my mind with the F word all the time. Anybody else there?
Yeah.
10 years, and I'm like, when's it gonna leave me, right? Like, you wanna snap. Sanctification is slow and steady. To become somebody else culturally almost takes as long as it's taken for you to become who you are. It takes that long for you to not be who you are and become somebody else. I went overseas at 26, I think I was 26 years old. I was deeply American, wholeheartedly white, homogenized, wealthy, Southern California American. That's all I knew, right? Nothing wrong with it, it's just all I knew. It took years and years and years, and now, I've been doing it for 25 years. Now what I know is if I go into a new place, you guys brought up Russia, you brought up South Korea, if I go into any of those places, because I've never lived there, I gotta start all over again. So what do I know? That I gotta constantly become like a child in this brand new culture, to then hopefully become a respected young adult, to then maybe in the future, if I do well, to become a respected leader, to help them understand who God is and how eternity is hanging in the balance. Each country, each culture, each community, you start all over again. Paul says, I have become all things to all people. Let's focus just for a moment here on all things. What does all things mean? And I'm going to throw out the question, what did Paul have to change to become all things to all people? And I'm asking for some suggestions.
Wasn't Timothy circumcised so he could reach the Jewish people?
Yeah, I guess his dad was Greek.
Yeah, that was Greek.
So Paul was born circumcised in the sense he was circumcised on the 8th day, right? But what did Paul have to lose to become like the people he was ministering to? Because he was called not to the Jews, but to the Gentiles.
Well, what I was saying there is like, Timothy wasn't Greek, he was an adult man, and Paul had him circumcised.
Right.
So he would match with the culture, even though
So he
it
would
wasn't
fit in.
necessary.
Right.
But I don't think, when it says all things, I don't think you go as far as like, when he goes into, is it, I forget which Corinthians it is.
Okay.
And he's speaking about food, he said, you know it's sacrifice to idols, don't know,
Right.
not eat the food.
Right.
But if you don't, then eat the food. So like,
Food, yeah.
essentially, he's like, he's become all things to people to a point of where it doesn't cost his
As
religion.
long as it doesn't offend God,
Yeah.
you can do it. What are some of the things we have to lose?
Well, just like that, like
Okay.
for Paul, like his entire life, like becoming this Pharisee among Pharisees,
Like,
and now.
yeah, but like, give me an actual example that would like be hard to do.
For Paul.
Let's say you were called to Morocco, right? And you live in Rabat, Morocco. What would you have to lose?
Control of my schedule.
Okay, control your schedule. What else?
I was
I'm looking for quick answers.
every aspect of like what career we wanted, what car we wanted, what home we wanted, the idea we had for raising our children, the idea we had for our marriage.
Every single thing you dreamed about
Right,
is washed away.
right.
Okay? And these are all great examples. What do you have to lose?
Paul lost his freedom because he was free from all men, and like his identity.
And what did Paul call himself? A doulos, right? An under-rower, a slave. When they use the word servant, I become a slave, right? I have no rights anymore. So let's just think about this practically. Think about cultural offenses. You go to somebody's home because that's how you interact with people is over food. You guys know that, right?
Amen.
You've got to eat their food or they will never open their hearts. Flat out. Knowing the word and eating their food are almost synonymous with each other. You've got to eat it. What if they serve you food that makes you want to puke? Lose it. Lose all of that. Okay? And here's a way that you guys can test each other. Oh, I don't know if you guys have different. You guys are all pretty much normal Americans. Imagine the girls are normally harder to do this. Imagine you girls are rooming together and your style is totally different than yours. And you guys dress each other that next day, right? Or you say, this is what I really want to wear, but you wear it. And what you want to wear, she wears it. Just these moments of like, why am I wearing those shoes? Right? Shoes are a big deal, you guys, right? Are shoes a big deal?
Yeah.
Would you wear my shoes?
I would.
You would, okay, all right. Would you wear Trent Birkenstocks? The socks? Okay? Simple stuff. We're talking about just the clothing you wear, just the shirt you put on, just the thing, right? I mean, we have so much going on in our culture, so much in our comfort zone. Just to dress like somebody makes you feel like you're losing your mind. It's called draining your identity. When Paul says all things, he's talking about his language, which we haven't even talked about today. It's essential, but it's massive. The way he lives, his home, and went from a beautiful home on a golf course to a hut with rats. That's a huge loss. No more personal vehicles at all.
Yeah.
At all.
No more
Maybe
trouble.
one vehicle for a family of 10, and it might run sometimes. And if you all had personal vehicles, nobody would listen to you because you'd be seen as Bill and Melinda Gates living on the mountain as the billionaires that are untouchable. You can't just live like Americans in other countries. Now, if you're living in Japan, maybe, but not in the way that you're used to. Your food will change, your concept of the church will change. When you're living amongst unreached people, there's no one to do worship. There's no one to give a message. There's no pastor to go to where you can just break down and weep and say, Pastor, my life is falling apart because of this food and this culture and the transportation and the temperature and everything around me is falling apart. Your pastor's 10,000 miles away and he's simply too busy to answer the phone when you call him. You're going to feel this sense of personal loss. I asked my wife one day after living overseas for like 4 years, what's the worst part about living here? And she goes, no worship. There's no one that just gets up and just strums the guitar. Because in Africa, they don't use guitars, at least where we lived. They build these, they look like big, kind of like a small boat of a piece of wood with a big stick that comes out the top, and they use string, not like guitar strings. They just use cords or lines, and they bent nails on the top of this thing, and they cover it with snakeskin. And one guy is beating on this snakeskin drum, while another guy is playing this weird harp guitar, homemade, sounds totally crazy. And the ladies in the back are leading in worship. The worship leaders in the front, the worship leaders in the back of the building, and it's men on one side, women on the other. Everybody's sweating to death. Women aren't wearing any shirts at all, so you're totally offended. Nobody's ever had deodorant in their life, and you got 200 people in a hot, stuffy room. The smell of BO and urine is beyond belief. You feel like you're in a cow pen, and the lady in the back is going, and they're worshiping, and you're like, I just want like Hillsong, right? Or whatever. I just want, girl, just somebody on a guitar singing in a language I understand. You got this screaming lady behind me, this crying kid, this other kid that just diarrhea all over the ground, and everybody's like, just put some dust over it, and you're like, I just want to worship. I'm losing my mind here. All things to all people.
Do you think it would be offensive to bring your own instruments, or like?
Not up front. So come with things, but keep them private. Once you build relationships, say to them, teach me yours. And they'll say, oh, you have one? I want to learn yours. So you've got to first build relationships. But if you come in and maybe we could use the word cookie cutter. You say Calvary Chapel looks like this in America, and now it's going to look like this in Africa. Never. That's called colonialism. That's like saying my ethnicity is better, and so it's going to look like this, right? You can't do that. You've got to merge into their culture, become like them, then they want to learn about your culture, and then the two cultures can find the best of both, and then they'll say, teach me to play guitar, teach me one of your songs. But I'll be honest with you, when we talk about worship, and remember, I'm trying to like unpackage 30 hours of teaching into like 10 minutes here. When we talk about worship, the British brought old hymns to Africa in the 50s. And I would watch this church that I was in, of all Africans, sing a hymn. I thought they were dead. They were all, and the Lord bless thee. Like they had no idea what to do with it. And then all of a sudden, they would say, okay, now open up in your little Bible hymnal things, which are these ridiculous paperback pamphlets. Open up to this thing in the Choli, because that was our language. So turn away from the old British English, which is archaic, anyways, and the words mean nothing to the Africans. Open this up in a Choli, and the whole place came alive. And they're dancing, and they're singing, and the kids are peeing on the ground, right? And everybody's sweating. I don't have a clue what they're doing, but man, they're having a good time. So my concept of worship looks like they're dead. Their concept of worship looks like they're alive. I'm standing back saying, where do I fit? I don't fit. I'm not an old British guy, and I don't even want you to sing those songs. But I don't fit into your mold because I don't understand your language, and I can't dance like that. I am white, right? I cannot dance like that. Those little kids that are 2 years old had 1,000 times more rhythm and more groove than all I ever have in my little, right, robot stiff life. I'm trying to, I can't do it. And all of a sudden the pastor grabs me and he's like, well, we gotta dance. Because you know all the pastors, they sit on the stage. I don't know if you guys have ever been overseas, all the leaders are on stage. So I'm sitting up on stage and they want me to dance with them, and I'm like, no, I can't do that. And this is the way the Africans do their worship. They got like this, oh, now I'm trying really hard. They got this little groove thing, and their shoulders and their hands, and to them, this means full posture, full worship. And they're doing this. A year into it, I'm sitting up on the stage, and a Choli song is being played. I'm starting to memorize the beat. I'm starting to feel it, and all of a sudden, my eyes are closed. I'm standing up. This is in the power of the Spirit. I'm standing up, and the Lord's filling me, and I find myself doing this. Crazy. And I'm like loving it. I'm like, this is awesome. I love it. This is like heaven. Is this Revelation 7 with all the people around the throne? This is awesome. No, what I wanted was this song, right? That's what I wanted. But the Lord changed me and said, you can worship me in any culture, in any language. But that transition time is where the problems come in, to become cross-cultural. Okay, I'm totally in trouble with my timing, so I'm going to speed this way up. To become all things to all people, you must first say, or let me rephrase that. You must first not say, your way is wrong and my way is right. Don't do that. Don't say, what I'm used to is right and what you do is wrong. Instead say, teach me. That's it. This is the big moment of transitioning from my birth culture to my new culture. To become an ambassador, you must say, I'm not going to reject you, I'm going to accept you. And I'm not just going to accept you for you, I want to learn to live like you, to become one of you in the way that you eat, in the way that you talk, in the way that you drive, in the way that you worship, in all of those ways, I want to be taught by you. Continuing in 1 Corinthians, Paul says, I have become all things to all people. This is what we want to point out now, that by all means I might save some. Jesus was very clear. There's a wide road and a narrow road. There are many that reject. There are few that find the way to heaven. The ambassador must not say, when I lose everything and become like them, they're all going to get born again. It doesn't happen. I mean, rarely do we hear about 90% of a culture turning to the Lord. If you see a 10% change in that culture, you have just witnessed radical revival. This is from the cross-cultural missionary giving his life. If he sees 1 out of 10 or 10 out of 100 become Christians, that's massive. Because then the cross-cultural missionary steps back at that point and disciples the leaders, because they culturally, the local people, they then can take it to every village, every household. They can take that revival to a whole new level. a single family, a single team, a single person, if they see a 10% change in that culture, they have witnessed revival. Paul says, I've become all things to all people. I've lost everything I know to gain everything I can so that some of them may be saved. Never say in your heart, if I do this, I'm going to see radical revival. Read through history. Read through missionary biographies. It is rare. But in time, after you've given everything, then God will then, it's almost like a snowball. It starts to roll, and the longer it rolls, it picks up more snow. It gets bigger and bigger. It gets more and more momentum, and in the end, it makes a greater impact. It starts off as a little, a pebble of snow on the top of the mountain. By the end of the mountain, it's this massive thing. That's what happens in missions. You are simply the beginning of the work. But to start the work, you must die to yourself completely. When I think of these texts, I think eternity is hanging in the balance. Give up my food? Of course, I can give up 20 years of liking what I eat for 2 billion years of enjoying the fruit from these decisions in eternity. So what if I give up the clothing that I think is good looking or makes me feel comfortable? So what if I give up a temperature that I like? So what if I never have another car of my own? So what if I never have technology or electricity or running water, which is really hard for people that have been raised with it. So what if I give it up for 50 years? What is 50 years compared to eternity? It's a vapor, right? It's a puff of smoke. Now, after thousands of days of living in full death as a cross-cultural missionary, you feel like it's over. You got to keep looking towards eternity and say eternity is hanging in the balance. Why would I not become totally like them? So that some of them may live in heaven with their Lord. The Lord gave everything to save me and everything to save you. And now he simply says what? Be like me. Go do what I did with every other 17,000 people. All right. This is what we call Viking missions. These guys are the average wealthy Western person that goes into a poverty-stricken country and says, we are superior, we know what to do, and if you adopt our way of life, you'll truly be happy. So this is what we call the total failure in missions. Can you guys grab that lights again?
Sure.
Never be a Viking. Accept people. Learn about them. Do not reject them. That is some kind of like a power bar. That's part of the video. I took a screenshot. Never be a Viking. Don't reject. Instead, become a learner.
I am Svart, son of Scott, of the House of Sklu. We come from a land far beyond the Great Sea. We have heard that this is a place of great darkness, of frail, powerless people. We have come down. The people of this realm have many problems. Most of them are bewitched by these small, flat magic stones. It's really quite sad. The men don't work. There's no pillaging, no plundering, no marauding. They just sit, enslaved by these strange glowing devices, forced to endlessly tap, 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 over and over. It's a meaningless existence. Breaks your heart. Be free! Be free, my brothers! When you can help someone less fortunate than you, there's no better feeling. It's why we came. They need to learn a better way. Our way. They need help with things that just seem so basic to us. These poor, wretched urchins are starving. Act like you like it. This is what passes for a meal here. This, a meal. We can help.
What is that?
Seal blubber.
Seal blubber.
She's moved to tears. You see how great the meat is here? No. Delicious. Look at this guy. So cute, but so weak. He should be able to take down a full-grown whale by now. We do this thing called VBS. It's been a huge success. The kids love Viking Battle School. Look at these rags. These people are truly destitute. How will this in battle ever stop a halberd from spilling their innards? That's why we've handed out over 100 Brinja. Just look at them. They've never seen such nice clothing. We've accomplished so much in just a few days. We helped someone who couldn't get his horseless cart to go. We've taught them better ways to use their unusually small fields. And as on most of these trips, lots of painting. These guys literally have no idea how to discourage their enemies from attacking. This has been an amazing trip. And look how happy they are. They just love us so much. And just because we are vastly superior to them in every possible way, doesn't mean that we haven't gotten as much as we've given. When we can bless them with the simple things that we take for granted, it makes you feel good. Wow. Thanks for the catapult.
It's called true acts of kindness, like battle axe.
What were they gonna do with that guy in the catapult?
That is what we do. We go into these cultures and we look at these cultures from our perspective. And we say if they just all had their own cars, if there's no roads, or gasoline, or mechanics, or even the way to buy a car, if they just all had cars, it would be great. If they all had electricity, so we buy them a generator, and they're like, we don't even know how to use a generator, and if we do use it, it makes so much noise that we have to turn the sound system up, so now we need a sound system. But nobody knows how to take care of the sound system. Americans spend tens of thousands of dollars constantly on things that aren't sustainable overseas. What you need to do is go to these countries, not on a short-term trip, but go and live with them for 1 or 2 years. And in living with them, ask the Lord, do they even need a penny, even in remote villages? Or do they need people to sit and talk and love and communicate with them? Did Jesus build anything?
He was a carpenter.
But did he, on his ministry journeys, when we see him in the Gospels, do we see him reverting back to normal labor? No, he could. And Paul, we know, made tents. So there's nothing wrong with using your hands. Like I was setting a fence 2 days ago. Like, 10-foot fence posts and cement. I was wiped out. So today I'm with you guys. So you can do multiple things. But when we go to these countries, do they need our money? Do they need our technology? No, what do they need? They need the gospel. They need love to open the door for the gospel to go through, and then in time, once people are saved and they have the mind of God and they love each other, then all of those other things will come in their own time. And government is the one that brings roads and electricity and running water. It's not nonprofits or NGOs, non-governmental organizations. The local people must want those things for them to be sustainable. Don't go to a people and say, if you just had what I had, then you would be happy. What is that? That's called missing the point. Their hearts need to be touched. How are their hearts touched? By sitting with them, spending time with them, and eating with them. Did Jesus ever turn down a meal?
No.
Remember when he was with Zacchaeus? What did he say to Zacchaeus?
I'm eating at your house tonight.
Can you imagine? I'm coming to your house. It was all about fellowship. The majority of the unreached people live in communities very similar in culture to New Testament theology. It's all about fellowship. If you want to reach 1.5 billion Muslims, learn to eat a lot. Drink a lot of coffee or tea. And spend a lot of time talking and eating. That's when revival is going to happen. It's not through money and technology and all of the other things that we think it is.
How, like, if you're allergic to something, like, how?
We'll deal with that. Yeah, it's a good question. We'll deal with that. That's part of the 30 hours that I'm trying to cram down there. 30 minutes, it's a great question. All right, important rules to follow. Write these down. These are life-changing. And like I said, we're trying to take a 12 semester and bring it into just a quick moment here. Important rules to follow. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Rule number 1, they will always try to honor you. They will never try to offend you. They will always try to honor you. They will never try to offend you. Are you the one that wanted to be my first?
Yeah.
All right, come on up. So, I'm living in this totally, you're right here. I'm living in this totally broken place. We've got kids that are starving all over. And one of our, did I show you guys my testimony on the starving kids?
Yeah.
Maybe those pictures of starving kids, the before and the after. Either way, we had a feeding center. 2,000 children were saved from starvation because one of our American missionaries and a group of African ladies got together and rescued these kids and physically fed them. Well, we needed a place to grow corn to then turn into Unimix, which is what you feed to a starving kid, because it was too expensive to buy. So I needed to find somebody that had land to cultivate. We're not talking about like irrigation and tractors. We're talking about hand plowing and hand watering. So I find three, not me, through another African pastor, African man, we found three ladies that had lost their entire families in the war. So we have three widows living on their own together to help each other, and they had, I think, 5 acres of land. But because they were 60 or 50-year-old ladies, they didn't have the strength to dig in the ground. So their land that was given to them in this refugee camp, everybody's given so many acres, was just left uncultivated. So I went to meet these ladies. So here's Rob the missionary and Pastor James, the Sudanese, and we go out to meet these ladies. Now, when I go to meet a lady in her home, what do I normally find in a refugee camp? What's the lady wearing? What are you wearing when I come to meet you?
Leaves.
Just a skirt.
Yeah,
Just a skirt, okay? Now, don't be offended, ladies. We're at this culture class. Just a skirt. You've never owned a bra, right? You've given birth to 10 children. So, without a shirt on, what do you look like? Not like a 16-year-old girl. My friend, the lady, her boobs are down here. Just flapping like this, okay? I'm just, they're just like that. We call them paps. They're called paps. We do this, right? Okay? So I come up as the American. I see 3 ladies. Already I'm fully mortified that I'm looking at my grandmother without a shirt on. Well, in my culture that I'm in now, you have to shake hands with everybody. If you don't shake hands, you don't love them. You don't respect them, they will never talk to you unless you shake their hand. It's first and foremost, this is body language 101, right? So now, Pastor James doesn't see any of the things that I see because he's African. He doesn't mind that she's topless. He doesn't mind that she's half-dressed. He doesn't mind that her boobs are down to here. To him, that's just totally normal. To me, as the American, what am I? I'm like sweating, like I don't even know what to do, like I don't even know how to look, okay? So now stand there as a lady, as we go to greet each other, because we have to greet. We don't ever get close to each other because there's space difference, but we lean forward. So lean forward and shake my hand. Okay, now what's happening as this lady's shaking my hand? Now in this culture, you kind of get excited when you get a visit and they bounce. Okay? So what's happening? Her boobs are slapping me in the back of the hand. And here I am, as the pastor, and the other pastor's just smiling, and this lady, grandma, is slapping me over and over and over. Everything in my body is shutting down. I can't even think. Okay?
Oh, God.
And then the second lady comes, and the third lady comes, and the pastor's just saying like this. Rob, I'm so glad you can meet my grandmother. They just love you so much. They're godly women. They've been praying. And they've been asking the Lord to use their thing. And you want to build a feeding center, and you want to use their land. They're so blessed. If you give them $5 a month, it'll change their lives, and it will grow food for the kids. And the whole time I'm thinking, I can't even believe that I'm here. Did this just happen to me? Lord, you're not serious. Now, who's got the problem in that moment?
You.
Only me. Only me. I asked my Sudanese later, after I worked through this, through 1,000 other scenarios that were that creepy. What triggers lust in your minds as men? Because the Bible says we shouldn't lust. And they said, what triggers lust for us is seeing the shape of the back of the leg. That's why all the ladies wear skirts. If the ladies don't wear skirts, we think they're prostitutes. I'm like, so this part you can see, they're like, yeah, of course. Those are udders. Those are for the babies. And then once the babies are done, they just kind of hang there. Your cows have udders, your wives have udders. They're just udders. I'm like, so well, it's kind of like the back of the elbow. They're like, yeah, it's a neutral thing. The back of the elbow or the lady's friends, all the same. Just never show us the back of the legs. And I had one American missionary, she wanted to wear spandex. And I said, whatever you do not wear spandex. In the city you can do that because they have a little different culture. Don't come to the village in spandex. She comes, we were in a car, she was like in the back seat and I didn't know it. And maybe she had a wraparound skirt on and the drive was so long and so hot. I think she took off her wraparound skirt and all she had on was a spandex that she had under her skirt. She gets out of the car when we're in the refugee camp and I'm talking to a group of ladies. And I'm sorry if this is graphic, but this is what it's like cross-cultural. Talking to this group of ladies. They were in my wife's Bible study. They're godly women. They've all just had kids, so they've got milk, so their boobs aren't down here, they're way out here. One of the ladies has her baby tied to her back, so I see these little baby hands, and this little baby face, and these little baby feet. And she's got this crisscross thing going on to hold her baby like in this poos thing. So her boobs are actually being held up and accentuated. And she's standing there, and I'm like, I can't even look at this lady. This is the creepiest thing in the world. And she looks over my shoulder and sees my friend with spandex on, and she goes, ah, ah. And I'm like, oh no. Cross-culturally, something just happened. Forget about me, forget about her. Somebody on my team just offended her. And my friend gets out, my American friend gets out of the car with spandex and walks from the car to the feeding center. And she said, Rob, we respect you. Now, praise the Lord, she spoke English, and I could fully understand what she was thinking. We respect you, but never let that happen again. You brought a prostitute in our midst, and she got out of your car, which means when that happens, our hearts and our minds are going to shut down from your message. The gospel is over if you ever do that again. Actions speak louder than words. Don't worry about your offenses, meaning how you are personally offended. Worry about them and the way that they're offended. So will they ever choose to offend you? Never. Ever. In their culture, shame and honor is big. Everything they do, shaking your hand, talking to you, and saying things to you, will always be done in love to bring honor to you. So you've got to have that mindset. I interpret that as dishonoring. They interpret it as honoring. I am the one that needs to change because I'm in their world. They're not in my world. Now, if they came to America, we wouldn't let them come to church topless, would we? No. We would say in our country, we wear shirts, ladies, no big deal. But in their country, they don't have to. So we can't force our culture on them, and we must remember that they will never dishonor us. Number 2, never judge them. When they want to honor me, don't judge them when they do something strange. I was eating with a group of people in Asia, and it was like this big grand dinner, and it was, I don't remember what it was for, maybe a graduation or some kind of a celebration, and they called me to be their honored guest. And I was like, wow, what a privilege, right? What a privilege to be called in. And I think it was like grandparents on both sides, and then there was parents, and then there was siblings, and maybe some neighbors, like 30, 40 people in the room. And they said, Rob is our guest at this graduation ceremony. I'm like blown out of the water that they want to honor me. I sit down with them, and they served me a plate of food. It was rice and curry, and maybe some kind of a pasta noodle, but with a hot curry pepper on it. And I was waiting for the silverware. Do you think it ever showed up? No. All of a sudden, they start eating with their fingers. You guys have ever eaten rice and curry with your fingers? No. It gets all over you, right? Literally, I'm sitting there trying to be the honored guest, and I'm trying to eat it. Everything in me says, do they hate me? Why don't they honor me? What is their problem? And I start judging them based upon the way they're serving food or not serving food. I'm now saying their hearts are corrupt, and they're trying to make me feel uncomfortable because they're not serving me food the way that my mother would have served me food. Then I said, wild cultural mistake, do you have a fork? And I watched this whole frenzy of communication go on between, no, we don't have forks. Our neighbors don't have forks. I don't even know where to buy a fork. Our honored guest wants a fork. Have we offended him? What have we done? We wanted to make him feel blessed and special in our culture, and then now he wants a fork. We don't have forks. My friend turned to me, which also spoke English and understood both my culture and his, and said, never ask for silverware because you're saying to them you're poor, you're uneducated, and you don't know how to eat. Because they've seen people on TV use silverware. So they said, he whispers to me, praise the Lord for these moments of clarity. Rob, eat with your fingers. Did Jesus have a fork? I'm like, I never thought about it. Did Jesus have soap? Did Jesus have soap?
Yeah, well, soap.
Did he have soap?
I don't know.
Did he have hand sanitizer?
COVID-19.
Did Jesus have running water? He might have had a bucket, and he did one of these two, which is good, right? He might have had ash, right? Ash helps, like, you know, with the fire. That helps on the Viraxo, right? Ash. But he didn't have what I have. And he never had silverware. Not that I know, I don't see any reference to silverware. And he goes, well, try to do it. So now I'm trying to do this. And I'm putting it here, and I'm trying to like take it in. It's like rice and curry all down my shirt. I'm a total child. Like a kid that needs a bib, right? Then a couple weeks later, I'm talking to a British guy that married an Asian girl. And I said, how do you do it? He goes, oh, my in-laws taught me because I went to their house and I made a fool of myself as the new British husband to this Asian family. And they said, we put our tongue out first. And then you do this so fast you don't see it. But he goes, we stick our tongue out, then we put the rice on our tongue, and then we bring our tongue in. And that's how you can do it with not even one grain of rice on your shirt. Because I'm trying to stuff this stuff in. Or it's like now everything's on my hands, it's on my face, it's all over me, and there's no running water, and there's no soap. So what am I? An ambassador? Or an ignorant child that needs a bib and can't feed himself? They will never offend me. I need to be very careful to never judge them based upon things that make me comfortable or uncomfortable. And then they said over time, they said, why do you use metal? You put metal in your mouth? Doesn't that taste weird? Why don't you like chew on it? I'm like, no, we don't bite our metal. They're like, well, we always use our fingers, and so it tastes better that way. So we tried to do the metal thing, and we're like biting it. We got like this tinfoil flavor. This is disgusting. Why would you guys do that? And I realized it was just preference, wasn't it? The Bible doesn't say you can or cannot, you should or should not. It just says eat. Eat and be with people. They will never, ever try to offend you. Do not judge them. Their mothers trained them differently. Rule number 3. Try to always keep a straight face. Whatever happens, don't be a Viking missionary and come into a situation and be like, what? Right? You know, the eyes are a big deal. What is this? I can't believe that I don't even know what you're doing. I had this American doctor, and he was one of those guys that was like so extraordinarily tall and so extraordinarily wide and white, which was an anomaly on all levels. Nobody's that tall, nobody's that heavy and shoulders, and nobody's that white. This guy was like a giant coming down the road. And I said, Dr. Chris, you're here for 2 weeks, but know this, you work in the most advanced internal medicine's community of doctors. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. Probably had access to the best machines known to mankind. That's what you're used to, Chris. Brilliance on multiple levels and all the technology in the world. I'm taking you into a Stone Age hospital, and I make sure, Chris, whatever you do, no facial expressions. And his wife laughed at me. She goes, he's facial expressions no matter what. He just is facial expressions all the time. He walks into the clinic and he smells this putrid smell of rotting blood, of kids urinating, of ladies giving birth, and no water to clean it. Talking about a lot of blood, a lot of fluid. It's horrible. Rotting sores. You know, people get these bites and they don't ever treat them, and their legs start to fester and like literally ooze, and you can smell it from a mile away. Like you try to see it, like when you watch a war movie, and everybody's like, "Oh, what's that smell?" That's what our clinics smell like all the time. Chris walks in and his face just explodes, and he's all, "What is this?" And I'm like grabbing him now. Remember, he's like this big, and I'm trying to pull him out the door. Chris, in one moment, you can undo a year of my work. In one facial expression, you can bring so much offense on the people that they're doing it wrong, that they're stupid, that they're ignorant. Because he would say things like, "This is absurd. That mom is abusing her child. What in the world are they doing?" And I'm trying to tell him, Chris, she was raised by a mother that's never seen penicillin, that doesn't know what peroxide is. They've never had a Band-Aid. She's doing the best that she knows how to do, and she is killing her child because of ignorance. But we can't just yell at her for it. We got to become like her, learn her language, be a part of her. Jesus has to fill her heart for her to even want to change, because the witch doctor taught her to treat her kids that way, and the witch doctor is conceived and controlled by the mind of the devil. And the devil comes what? To kill, to steal, and to destroy. This is not something we can fix by shouting at people and looking at them with these crazy facial features. This is something that they take like a decade of the gospel, and then the gospel will transform this place. Always, always be aware of what your face is doing. If they're not offended, don't be offended. If they are offended, be offended, even if you don't know why. If they laugh, you laugh. Now, it feels a bit hypocritical, but you just gotta go with it. If they smile, you smile. Like, why we smile? Oh, just smile. You gotta do it for months and months and months, and then finally, you'll pick up on the cues. Or we're scared, or we're laughing, or we're angry, or we're just quiet. You gotta pick up on the cultural cues. Number 4, go with no expectations. Your trials will be gauged upon your expectations. If you expect things, to be a certain way, and they'll never be that way, the higher your expectations are, the further you'll fall when reality hits. So you go with these ideas like it's going to be just like my hometown. It's going to be just like my family's upbringing. When you go with those expectations and it's not that, then you crash and burn. But if you go with no expectations, what happens? Yeah, it's not what you thought, but you know it's not that bad. And in a sense, it makes this massive mountain, like trying to climb Mount Everest, in your mind and spiritually, and it turns into a speed bump on the road. You determine how high and how intense your trials are going to be based upon your expectations. This is the greatest lesson that any missionary can learn. If I expect it to be totally awkward, totally uncomfortable, then you know what? I'll be ripped. If I think it's going to make me feel not just comfortable, I don't want to overuse the word, if it's going to make me feel like I'm at home, I'm going to be so shocked by the culture, I am going to never make it. So your expectations either rise or fall based upon your mindset. Culture shock examples from my life. Now, in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to give you 5 culture shock examples, and we're going to run over just a little bit so I can get through these. From my life. These are not things I've read in the book. These are things that happened to me and my wife and my team when we first went out. Shaking Brenda's hand was my hardest, and that was one of my first. So here is, actually this is the very, very first. This is what I call, did he really just do that? Who wants to be my volunteer? I need a guy. Okay. Did he really just do that? In this scenario, Pastor Trent and I went to South Sudan. You're next to me here. Pastor Trent and I went to South Sudan, and we were going to be teaching at this conference, which was really exciting, right? So there's this guy, about 6'9", is how tall you are, and your hands are as big as Kobe Bryant's, okay? You don't have little hands, you got like you wear like a size 15 shoe. That's how big this guy is. Your name is Augustine, by the way. Augustine was one of the greatest evangelists I ever met. Augustine, after this scenario took place, would drive with a Jeep and a couple of the guys into the remote areas where the rebels were occupying to bring the gospel to broken people. Augustine was killed by rebels. He was a martyr for Jesus Christ. They RPG'd his car, which means as his car was going through this dusty little mountain pass, a rocket-propelled grenade launched his car, and he was incinerated. This man was a hero. Now, that all took place after this scenario. So you and I are walking down the street, and I'm talking to you. Now, you speak perfect English, which is awesome. Also 5 other languages. So I feel like a total idiot. So Augustine's telling me about his life. He's telling me about his testimony. We're trying to get to know each other. We're hanging out. We're walking from a church to somewhere else to do some kind of a conference. And all of a sudden, as Augustine and I are talking, now remember, he wears a size 15 shoe. His hands are way bigger than mine. All of a sudden, his hand does this. Now, how awkward is this? Okay? I only do this with my wife. All of a sudden, he's just like every kind of seat guy, though. Okay? He's holding my hand to me. And I'm thinking, I'm sweating. I'm starting to get nervous, right? Everything in me switching. There's a grown man holding my hand. My dad taught me that if you do one thing that seems a big gentle son, you're going to get it down. I grew up in a very male-dominant society. Now, Augustine's holding my hand. Everything in me is saying, this is wrong. Right? This is wrong. I'm going to keep holding it. This is wrong.
Just let it happen.
Now, what's happening? What's happening behind me? Just stay here, guys. Now I'm Pastor Trent. Trent's behind me with a camera. And he's snapping. Wait till I show the church. And I'm just sitting here sweating. Dude, don't take pictures. Dude, what are you doing? Dude, this is so wrong. Now, what if I would have rejected his hand? Because that's what my flesh was telling me to do. What if I would? what would have happened? Okay?
Beat you up.
He would have said, you think you're better than me? Why did you do that? Okay? Now this went on for like a half an hour. I was dying. Now, we get to the conference, sitting on the table this way. We get to the conference, and it goes from the hand to the leg. Okay. Straight face. Straight face. I will never do anything to offend you. I will always try to honor you. And what am I doing? I'm explaining to you that I think of you as a brother. And I've accepted you into my culture. And now I'm ready to open my heart to hear about righteousness and Jesus Christ from you. But I'm doing it in a way that makes you feel so wrong. All right, good man.
I was like kidding. I was like, is that gay? Like, what's happening here?
And then I said to him, a couple months later, after I recovered from the moment, then I said to him, you guys have a problem with homosexuality? They're like, you think we're gay? Well, no. In fact, I just held my hand. Well, do you think that's homosexual? Well, yeah, it's homosexual to you. They're like, absolutely not. They said if a homosexual person in our community shows any sign of homosexuality, we take him out and we hang him from the tree. Our culture, we kill homosexuals. That's the way our culture is. I'm also, this isn't gay. They're like, absolutely not. So now, here, now you're my guy. Now that I'm used to them and they're used to me, all of a sudden, this is starting to become normal. Little pinky swing. Kicking it with your boy, right? Check it out. Hey, bro, how you doing, Mike? Good to see you, bro. Praise the Lord. I've been praying for you. And you've got to move in your life, man. The Holy Spirit's just going to fall upon you. They literally pinky swing, just like that. All right, you're good. Thanks a lot.
Great job, Mike.
I'm studying the Word. And I'm looking for, thou shalt not hold a man's hand. It's not there, is it?
No.
No, but my dad taught me, you hold a man's hand, son, it's over. Right? My culture taught me, as a believer, you can't do anything homosexual. Then I realized that the interpretation of homosexual is totally different. From my home, 10,000 miles from this home, they said we would never do anything like that. And the man that did it to me first was what? Was Stephen. He was the martyr. He was the Christian hero. It wasn't homosexual. He was saying to me, I love you, and I know you love me, and we now can do ministry together. And then they said, Rob, whatever you do, never hold your wife's hand in public. What's wrong with you? Right? Now the judgment's coming. So I can't hold my wife's hand? They said, no, that's pornographic. You can't put your arm around her. You can't sit next to her in church. You can't even speak to her like a lot in public unless you're in a big group with other people. Kind of like, when you're dating and you're like trying to be totally pure and there's like 3 people between you and the person you want to date and you're a young believer. Yeah. That's the way they live their whole lives until they're in their huts and in their homes, and then of course they can have kids, right? But outside of the hut, there is no sign of physical affection whatsoever except for woman to woman or man to man, never cross-gender. Wow. Now, when I arrived in that culture, it doesn't say men are going to hold your hand. It doesn't say that stuff, right? It's hidden in the culture. All right, just relax and let them do what they do. Yes.
So instead of asking Pastor Trent for asking for
that was before digital. I don't even know if he'll have it, but man. Okay. All right. So here's my next one. I can't believe he just said that. Right? I can't believe he just said that. Okay, you want to volunteer? You come on.
I just get said something to us.
Can you guys whisper to David? Tell him we're going to be 10 minutes late.
Oh wow, this guy gets all.
Whispers
don't
help. All right. So your name again? David. David is my wife Heidi. Okay? So picture David. Picture David at about 120 pounds. Little thin thing, right? So thin that they thought my wife had AIDS because she was thin. Because to them they want to be big, they don't want to be thin. So you're a thin, young, right, blonde girl, right? You come walking
None of
into
you guys better stumble.
you come walking into a room, and what's the first thing people say to you?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
You were looking can check somebody's fat content, and they're checking her, oh, you were looking so fat today. And I won't do it because this is crossing the line, but they start touching her butt. And now they're squeezing her buttocks, calling her fat. All right, here we go. Notice if I have a girl come up, I would never say that to one of our sisters in the class. Because culturally, if I say that to you in public, it would like haunt you for days, right?
Wait, that was another female?
That was a man or a woman saying it to every woman that walked in the room. You were looking so fat today.
Wait, no, but the incident with your wife, the event.
Yeah.
it was
So
a
in that
guy
incident,
telling
it
you
was a
that?
guy, and then two other girls were like, yes, you're looking so fat. My wife's like, what?
But who was like grabbing your wife?
That was a lady, so the
Okay.
men
I'm
know.
sorry, I
Sorry, I
accept
should
that,
be
I'm
clear.
sorry.
The ladies check the elbow and they check the
That's
butt,
what-
right? That's a lady to lady thing. It's never a man to lady thing.
Okay.
And I sat down with one of my Sudanese, and this is after like weeks of every girl on my team. Oh, I think they had 4 of them. They were mortified. They're gonna call me fat again. Am I really that fat? I am that fat. I can't believe it. Everywhere we go, they're gonna call me fat. So I sit down with a guy that understood English and understood his culture and my culture, and I said, tell me about the fat thing. And they said, Rob, we're Sudanese. We come from a war zone. Our people have starved to death. People have died of HIV. We have nothing. So the average person is skin and bones. Like, you see those pictures of people starving? Those are South Sudanese. So when somebody gains even 2 pounds, it means that God's blessed them. And when a lady gets married, and she doesn't have to hoe in the fields and go down to the well and carry the water, if her husband can hire servants to do all that, it means that God has blessed her to the point where she can sit and drink milk. And milk is what makes them big. Because remember, there's no manufactured food here. Like corn and things aren't going to make them fat. But milk is, when a lady can gain weight, it means that God's blessed them.
Wow.
So you guys are obsessed, and because he's seen movies and he's seen all the gymnasiums and the workouts and all. He goes, you guys are obsessed to become skinny. We're obsessed to become fat. So even if somebody is as skinny as can be, we say to them, you're looking so fat, because we just want to shower blessings on them. Kind of like saying, somebody says to you, how are you doing today? And you just got word that something terrible happened in your life. You're like, I'm doing okay, right? It's a lie. It's a lie to make everybody feel comfortable. So they're showering blessing on us even when they don't mean it, because they want you to feel honored. Were they trying to dishonor my wife?
No.
We're trying to honor her. And while my wife is from the most affluent culture ever known to man, with all of our processed food and all of our technology, so she's never picked up a hoe and dug in the field. So what does she do? She sits at home and eats. So she gets fat. So where does she want to be? She wants to be skinny. And the people overseas that are not happy with that, they can't get fat. So where do they want to be? They want to be fat. The grass is always greener on the other side of the hill. That's all we're seeing here, is a cultural way to interact. Choose to smile when they say things like that to you. Did you just see that? This one of my favorite. Hear me now, sitting in the front row. I'm sitting there at a church, remember? Oh, and after I tell you, we're sitting on these little bitty logs that are about 2 feet off the ground, so my butt's like on fire, sitting on this little log, urine, kids, topless, sweat, humidity, a horrible sounding worship. I'm sitting there. Pastor gets up, opens his Bible. As he's teaching the word, he starts to pick his nose. Okay, now I'm turning my head because I don't have my finger on my nose, just so you guys can get a picture. I'm turning my head, but he's picking his nose, right? And he brings his hand back down and opens his word. He's reading it, turning the page, and he starts picking the other nostril. And he's going for it. I'm like,
Get her done.
straight face. How long will an American pastor last if he picked his nose during this message? His last sermon, that's an excellent way to say it. So then pastor's done picking his nose, both sides, and his message. And these services go for 2 or 3 hours, maybe 3, 4, whatever, they're a long time. He says, now we've heard from the word, let's hear from one of our sisters. She's going to give her testimony. So Olga gets up. Olga's a friend of my wife's. She gets up, she's nervous. She's never spoken in public. She's this poor lady, she's got dirt all over her clothes. She's got 3 little kids. Husband was killed in the war. She's destitute. She gets up and she's talking about God's goodness in her life. She's so nervous, she starts to double take. She puts fingers up both sides of the nostril, and she's going for it as she's talking. Right in the front line, goes, what is happening? And I turn to the Africans, and they're like, oh, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. Like, nobody's got a problem with it. Nobody's got a problem with it. Dawns on me, their mothers never taught them not to pick their nose. What would happen to you if you were picking your nose at the dinner table? Right? And then it's a flat second. And then a flat second. I don't care if you're Latin or you're European or whatever. You're an American, you pick your nose at the dinner table, it's over. But their mothers never taught them that. There's no Bible verse, thou shalt not pick thy nose. Is there?
No.
I'd be sitting with a group of ladies, they have these little gaps in their teeth, and they get spit 20 feet. Oh, grandma just, and they're just spitting everywhere. I'm like, why are they spitting? My mother would never let me do that, right?
Yeah.
When I would do that as a kid, my mom would slap me. But the Bible doesn't say thou shalt not spit, does it?
No.
It's all cultural, you follow me?
Yeah.
We're not talking about immorality, we're not talking about worshiping false gods, we're not talking about any of the clarity of the Ten Commandments, we're just talking about cultural things that could be listed in the thousands. Don't walk, don't talk, don't eat, don't do these things. I can't believe this just happened. All right. There is no way I'm eating that. Now I need 2 volunteers. I need one guy, one girl. Okay? Girl? Got it. In the back. One guy, one girl. Go. Okay? You have come to my country. I am a pastor in India. You, right? Let's say you're Pastor Trent. You're Pastor Trent, and you're Pastor Trent's wife, right? And you come to my country, Trent. You taught us the book of Philippians in 4 days, and we're a group of Indian nationals. We're risking our lives to plant the gospel amongst Hindu villages. We love you. Thank you so much for pouring out your heart for us. Thank you so much, Debbie, for coming. And the lady literally is going in the room and getting the wraparound sari, and she's trying to dress you in an Indian thing because you're such a lovely Indian girl. And like just pouring out all this love. And then around the table is me and my wife and about 5 other people. So there are like 8 or 10 of us Americans at this table. And the man goes, his name was Benny. He goes, we got something special for you Americans. And I'm thinking, oh. 1997, our first trip overseas, and Benny's got something special for us Americans.
Oh, man.
Okay? So Benny says,
Oh, no.
we search high and low for American food. My son, and he's telling us his whole story, we know his son. Benny, his wife Annie, Danny, and Finney. Danny got on a bus and spent 2 days going to another bigger city to get American food. So they're like excited. They call them the neighbors, grandma's watching. So you got all these Americans sitting in the circle, and all of these Indians just like looking. Remember that scene where everybody's like fishbowling you? We're so blessed to have you with us. Then all of a sudden they're all, and then we found that we know that you Americans eat with metal. Ooh, found silverware. This is a big deal. We went to 10 neighbors, and one of our 10 neighbors had enough forks for the team. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. What do you get? Rice and curry? Like, what's my Indian friend gonna feed me? Okay, are you ready? No way I'm gonna eat that. Straight face, eat what's set before you is what Jesus said. Then the big reveal comes. You ready? On a bus for 2 days, you get cornflakes. You know how much this cost overseas? This cost a week's wage for this box of cornflakes. And we got it for you. Now all of a sudden, I'm sitting there with a fork and a plate, and this super happy Indian guy trying to pour cornflakes on my plate. And I'm looking at it thinking, what in the world? Now remember, this isn't done like, this isn't like hidden far away. This is everybody's watching. What are we gonna do? And then he said, my other son, the one that didn't take the bus, he stayed home, he's been milking the cow and boiling the milk all morning so that we can give you an American dinner. Boiled milk on the cornflakes. Okay? Now you'll smell this when I pour it out. You'll see the steam. Isn't that beautiful?
Amazing.
120 or 220 degrees. 220. I boiled it. I got it above boiling so it would burn. That's how they do it. Okay? Now how appetizing is this to you?
Honestly, it doesn't look that good. I don't like it today either.
Okay? Now did we know that before I called her up?
Not today.
Can she even tell me that now? Maybe, maybe not. She's allergic to dairy, she's lactose. Okay? Okay? You have to take a couple bites. Will it hurt you a lot?
No.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Yes, it will,
So now
actually.
we prayed and we
It's
talked,
gonna be good.
just take this, yeah, let the milk just, if you want to, you could just sit there and look at it while it sogs, because that's what we did. We just sat there and it was just sogging and sogging. And now, this guy, right, this Indian guy, he's on fire. He's like, we are so blessed that you guys came. We're so thankful that you're here. And he's just pouring it out. We're like, dude, stop, right? Let us just eat in peace. It tastes good?
It actually does.
You don't like it?
No.
Oh, you do? Okay, good, all right.
No lies, hot milk, it's good.
Now, part of me, being a 26-year-old, whatever, ethnocentric person, the first thing I want to do is just push that thing away and say, what? That's awkward. You can't give me cornflakes
It's
on a plate.
awkward.
You can't give me boiled milk on a fork. And I'm just like, trying to push this thing away. My friend looks at me, and he looks at them, and he goes, praise the Lord, and he grabs the plate, and he's like, he's this iron worker, so he's this big construction guy, and he's just taking it off, like, thank you so much, and milk's like, dripping from his face, and Trent and I both looking at each other like, what? This is just wild. It's okay, you don't have to eat too much, I know you're lactose.
It's not lactose, deliberately allergic to dairy.
Right, so that's half and half, and whole milk, just so you know. Because you guys know when you milk a cow, they don't take the fat out of the cow. We're talking, you boil that stuff on top, and you only scrape off the top and make butter out of it. That's what we're talking about here. You guys like it?
Booston's doing good,
Yeah. You know that when you like something overseas, they can come on the right? Right? Oh, is there a little part of your plate that needs a little, okay, all right.
Lucy was having a ball.
Yeah.
She's got dry cereal now, so she's actually gonna eat that without getting lactose. All right, you guys did a great job. Thank you for that. Now the part that I couldn't play up before you guys came up was we were so sick for that whole. Oh, yeah, leave it down. I'll take care of it. We were so sick because we were your guests. A guest cannot clean up, and so it makes me feel like a bad host.
I don't think he was gonna clean up.
We were sick for weeks. Just the water, just everything makes you sick. I literally have never thrown down. You guys follow me? You throw up first, you throw down second. You throw up first, you throw down second. Weeks, and you're just like turning. Everything tastes horrible. And the end of our trip, they give us this. And I'm thinking, there's nothing wrong with it, is there? There's nothing unhealthy about it. I mean, you can be lactose, most of the world doesn't even know what that means. But there's nothing wrong with this, is there? No. They literally spent like a week's wage, and their son took days to do it, and all they were trying to do was bless us and honor us, and because of cultural norms, we wanted to push it away. What does the Bible say very clearly? The Bible says, eat what is set before you. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:27, for if one of the believers invites you to dinner and you are disposed to go, unbelievers, if an unbeliever invites you to dinner and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising questions on the ground of conscience. This is the whole meat and idols. Jesus said in Luke 10:8, whenever you enter a town, they receive you, eat what is set before you. Therefore, biblically speaking, as an ambassador of Jesus Christ, as a cross-cultural missionary, if you're called to follow, repeat it with me, you're called to swallow. Follow, you're called to swallow. It's all a part of it. There's no way to get around it. Now, I'm going to end with this one. And I think I see David yelling at me. I'm 13 minutes late. You've got to be kidding. That's not a bathroom. Have you ever had one of those moments? You've got to be kidding. That is not a bathroom.
Oh.
We were living in a city, waiting for the approval to move into the village. And in the city, an African man and 3 other African guys that were all like in college or Bible college or something like that, invited us into their home. So there was 7 or 8 Americans and 5 Africans in a 2-room house. So we're packed in this place. My wife and I were in separate rooms for months. We're used to having our own house. And now we're living in separate rooms. I'm in bunk beds with guys, she's in bunk beds with girls. Just think of the cultural things and marriage with that. And then after a while, we actually would sleep in the kitchen on the floor just so we could talk in private because we couldn't do that at all. So all these things are going on. and then one day the electricity goes off. But I'm right next to the Nile River with the largest electrical power plant from the Nile River that you've ever seen in Africa. But the people in Kenya, the next country over, they pay more for electricity, so the Ugandans don't give electricity to their people where I was living, they ship it off to another country. So I'm looking at the largest body of water in Africa, the largest river almost in the world, and the largest electrical generator, and I have no power whatsoever for like 4 or 5 days. After 4 or 5 days, there's no running water because the water is being pumped by what? The electricity. And then the bathrooms in the house don't work because there's no water. So you go into the bathrooms, I don't want to make you guys take before dinner or before lunch, but you ever been in a bathroom and it's like this high out of the toilet and you're like, I can't even go in that bathroom? You guys track with me? That's what it's like. So we go to the outhouse instead. My African brain goes, oh Rob, we have a plan. When these things happen, the electricity goes out, the water goes out, we have a backup plan. So I go out to their backup plan and I'm looking at it and it's just a hole in the ground, right? And in the day, it's not that bad. It's just got a weird smell. There's like a 30-foot pit. And so you're either, as a guy, you're standing or you're going down, and I'll teach you in other cultures classes how to do that with your clothing and not ruin your clothing as you're trying to squat over a hole. Anybody ever squatted over holes? It's a whole other thing, okay? Here's the biggest problem. When you gotta go in the night, you don't want to, but then you do. You go outside, never do this, every American does it. You get out your flashlight and you look down into the hole. What do you see?
Everything.
Millions of cockroaches. The walls are just climbing 30 feet of cockroaches. And then all that sewage on the bottom. And it's just like teeming with cockroaches.
Yeah.
After about a week of this, and the throwing up and throwing down and being sick and being hot and no water, no bathrooms, not even able to talk to my wife, all of these cultural things are going on. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And then I realized that we had this spray poison called Doom. We would spray it in our rooms in the night when the mosquitoes would come out to kill the mosquitoes, and then after about a half an hour the Doom kills everything, then you go in your room and you get under your mosquito net, and hopefully you don't get malaria. And I'm like, wait, I got an idea. I can fix this problem. I've got 5 cans of spray Doom, and I've got duct tape, because every American's got to bring duct tape. So I go outside in the middle of the day, and my host, this African man, he's like, well, what are you doing? Well, just watch. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to go kill all those cockroaches. So I take these 5 cans of Doom, and I duct tape them so they're on full spray, right? So like they're being held down by the duct tape, and I throw 3 cans down into the hole. And then I put 2 cans right where my feet would go, and I try to cover the hole with like a piece of wood. I step back all proud of myself. I'm going to fix this cockroach problem. And my Africans look at me like, what in the world have you done? Within seconds of my excitement, this thing explodes with cockroaches. Out the top, they're coming out those pipes are coming, vents on the top, they're coming under the door. The entire ground in front of us and in every direction were carpeted with cockroaches. He looks at me, I look at him, that's not what I was planning. And he's like, what are you doing? I invite you into my home. I'm your host and you're my guest, and now cockroaches. And as we're stepping back, because they're coming towards us like a horror movie, we're literally stepping back, we're up against the wall, we step aside, and the cockroaches go right up the wall, right into the kitchen, and all the way through his house. What just happened? I tried to change the culture. I tried to make what's normal for them comfortable for me. But what was the result? I created the crisis. I created the total crisis. My wife's like, put your flashlight away. Don't look into the hole. Do whatever you gotta do and get out of there. What was all that? I'm like, but I'm all about control. I like to fix. I like to modify. I like to make things comfortable. She goes, drop it, babe. Drop it. You created a crisis. Cross-culturally, at that moment, if my host wouldn't have been totally born again, and he told me later, if I wouldn't have gone to a YWAM training where I had learned about other cultures, I would have kicked your butt and threw you out of my house. But when I realized you never grew up the way that I grew up, I decided to forgive you and have mercy on you. What if I was with unreached people? What would I have done? I would have ruined my witness in their community. They would have thrown me out, and that entire village would have been shut off to the gospel, at least for me, for the next 10 years. Why? Because I wanted to make it feel more like home. Did Jesus ever have a toilet? Just think about it. Did he have toilet paper?
No.
What did he do when he had to go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
But
As a He would dig a hole, he would squat, he would use sand or dirt. He would clean himself with his hands, wash his hands with dirt, earth, go into the river, wash that, bury it over the hole, and move on. If the Son of God that came from all eternity and all that purity and perfection came to this earth to live like a Hebrew 2,000 years ago, why can't I? Why do I think I'm any better than God Almighty? And I am convinced, after all of these years, that God came to the earth at that time in history because it was so basic and so primitive, but they had writing, so that the message could go out, but that all people that received that message could say, God lived like me. Nobody today lives less than Jesus did. So everybody that reads the scriptures can say, that God knows me. He's not just a wealthy Westerner that lives in some big city and has a cell phone. He walked around and lived like a common person. So I'm called to be what? Like Jesus. I'm called to live the way that he did. I'm called to walk away from everything. And if he did it, and he's filling me with his spirit, now I can do it. If I don't do it, I shut off the gospel. Because eternity is hanging in the balance. Right? Eternity is hanging out. Let's conclude with this thought. If it doesn't break the 10 Commandments, do it. It's not murder. It's not adultery. It's not worshiping false gods. Like, I don't go into temples and bow down to false gods ever. But will I witness near a temple? Yes, absolutely. If it doesn't break the 10 Commandments, do it. If it breaks the 10,000 rules that your mom gave you, set those aside and do whatever they ask you to do. So you are going to offend your mother all day long when you live in another culture, but never offend God. God gives you the simplicity of his commandments in the 10 Commandments. Now you can look at all the commandments. We can deal with that in a whole other class on how to do this and when to do that. All of that is in the text. But if it only offends my mom and it doesn't offend God, I have the right and I also have the obligation to do it so that I can be the ambassador that preaches the gospel not only with my words, but also with my actions. Because those two are married together. Amen?
Amen.
Let's pray. Lord, we ask for wisdom. We ask for you to reveal these things to us, even in our dorms, even with, let's say, Latin or European cultures and African American cultures, and Midwest and West Coast, and how we have these subcultures. Lord, help us to die to our comforts and help us to see the reality of you, Jesus, and your Spirit, and your salvation, and your blood washing away sin in all of these different ways of living, these different cultures. Help us to be, Lord, your ambassadors, molded and shaped by you. Fill us with you, that we might live like you, and that love might be seen, and your truth might be heard. Use us for your sake, and for the sake of perishing immortal souls. We love you, Jesus. In your name we pray.